In the last section, we learned how Britain started making trade laws that they were going to use in order to get more wealth. And one of these trade laws that they used was called the Navigation Acts. Now, the Navigation Acts have these three parts: how trade goods would be transported, where trade goods would be exported to and imported from, and which natural resource trade goods the colonies could export. Now we're going to look at each one for its details. In the first one, the Navigation Acts and how trade goods were transported. Part of the Navigation Acts said that only ships built in Britain or its colonies could transport imports and exports to and from the colonies. So they were only allowed to use British or colonial ships. In addition, the Acts said that, let me turn the page, most of the sailors working on those ships had to be from Britain or its colonies. That part of the Navigation Acts benefited both the 13 colonies and Britain because it allowed the development of the shipbuilding industry that we learned about when we talked about the New England colonies, and guaranteed jobs for colonial sailors. It also kept all the transportation and money earned by transportation under British control. The Navigation Acts and where trade goods would be exported to and imported from. That's the second part of the Navigation Acts that said all trade goods sold to other countries by the 13 colonies had to go to Britain first before they were taken to other countries. The law also stated that all goods that were imported to the 13 colonies from other countries had to be shipped to Britain first before being sent to the 13 colonies. That law benefited Britain in two ways. First, Britain collected taxes on those trade goods because Britain collected taxes on all goods imported to England or exported from England. Second, once trade goods from foreign countries were in Britain, they could only be shipped to its colonies on British ships using British crews. However, the part of the Navigation Acts that prohibited or prevented colonial traders from selling directly to other countries was not strictly enforced or controlled. So many colonial traders disobeyed that law and continued to export colonial goods directly to other countries, especially to the colonies of France and Holland in the Caribbean Sea. By selling to other countries directly, colonial traders avoided the extra expense it cost to sail to Britain first. Because colonial traders broke this part of the law, the British government was not collecting all of the import and export taxes on colonial trade goods that Parliament believed the government should be receiving. This was an economic problem. Let's look at the third part of the Navigation Act. The Navigation Acts and colonial exports. Britain also made laws that controlled the exporting or the selling of natural resources from the colonies. Colonial natural resources that were also found in Britain could not be exported to Britain. For example, English fishermen were able to catch lots of fish off the coast of Britain. There were also fish off the coast of the colonies. But because the natural resource of fish was available in England, British laws prohibited or would not allow the colonies to sell fish to anybody in Britain. The purpose of those laws was to prevent economic problems for the British people involved in industries that used natural resources that were already found in Britain. Some of the laws benefited the colonies. For example, the British could not buy tobacco or sugar unless it was grown in the English colonies. Another way the Navigation Acts limited colonial exports was by limiting the types of manufactured products that were made to the colonies. So that limitation prevented the colonies from creating economic problems for industries in Britain. The British government made laws to prevent the colonies from developing industries that might compete with industries in Britain. So, for example, the British government enacted laws that made it difficult for the development of large-scale iron manufacturing in the colonies. So if you had a craftsman who used iron to make a rifle, they could not sell that rifle to anybody in Britain because Britain already had people who took iron and manufactured it to make rifles. So they weren't allowed to sell those goods. The laws made it difficult for colonists to start factories to produce manufactured items as well, which limited their jobs and limited the amount of money that they would be able to make. The effect of the Navigation Acts. It was positive for Britain. The Navigation Acts increased tax money for imports and exports, although not as much as they intended because of people breaking that second rule. The acts also enabled the British government to create more jobs for its people. But the navigation also had a mixed effect, mostly negative, on the 13 colonies. The Navigation Acts had a negative effect because certain industries associated with the resources that were not developed within the colonies, that they weren't allowed to export or sell, impacted their ability to grow and to be able to sell what they had in their area. The act also increased the prices the colonists had to pay for some of the items that were traded already. So let's just look at a problem, solution, and effect. Britain tried to gain wealth by passing trade laws. Britain wanted wealth from its imports and exports. This was an economic problem. Their solution was that Britain passed trade laws that controlled trade goods, natural resources, and shipping. The effect? Britain gained money from its trade.